Okay, so now we come to this lovely book on my naughty list. It's called Aleister Crowley, The Biography by Tobias Churton, and it says, spiritual revolutionary, romantic explorer, occult master and spy, including previously unpublished letters and research. And on the back it says, 90% of the authentic material here has never before been published. We're going a bit off piece because Crowley, no, it should be Crowley, shouldn't it? Crowley is not really only known for tarot, but he does loom large in the tarot verse, doesn't he? And there's Rider-Waite-Smith, there's Marseille, and there's Thoth. And you have to deal with Thoth sooner or later if you get into tarot, either to say yes to it or to say no to it. The last video of naughty books, of tarot books that I don't like, was I think about 2 years ago, and got a lot of clicks, ladies and gentlemen. And one of the books that I said that I didn't like and I didn't really particularly want to sort of deal with, I suppose, was the book of Thoth, Crowley's tarot book. And I got into trouble, I think quite rightly, with a Crowley fan who wrote back on the comments and said, you haven't thought about it, you don't know what you're talking about, you better up your game. I didn't reply because I thought that was slightly aggressive in tone, but he was right. And that has sort of haunted me since then. And I've been thinking, okay, I have to up my game, ladies and gentlemen. I have to do some proper Crowley research. So I thought really what I want to do is I want to read a good biography of Crowley that'll get me up to speed. So the good news is that this book is a sort of, the project is that it's a major rehabilitation of Aleister Crowley, and it sets out to set the record straight. And what you get from this book on the plus side is that Crowley was and still is, in a sense, the victim of a massive, massive smear campaign, which I think can be traced back to the fact that he was a sexual experimenter, that he was bisexual, so that he was partly queer, and that he was a sexual, what is the word? A sexual rebel, I suppose. I mean, he was a rebel anyway, and there was a lot of sex involved. In this, I mean, he came quite soon after Oscar Wilde, and look what happened to Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde was, Oscar Wilde did hard labour and then died horribly. So Crowley's crime, in a way, was to be sex positive. And he was ruthlessly attacked and smeared really by the gutter press. And no one came to his defence. And in a sense, the myth of Crowley as, devil worshipper who sacrificed babies, and that sacrificing of babies is a very real part of the smear campaign that accrued, that was directed at Crowley. That myth has survived to the present day. And, the rehabilitation of Crowley may take a long time. It may never happen. My husband was recently reading this book, Uprooted, On the Trail of the Green Man by Nina Lyon. And it's a nice book. It's not a scholarly work. It doesn't have footnotes. It doesn't have references. I don't think it has a bibliography. But it's about spiritual stuff. It's about the legend of the Green Man. It's about going around England doing sort of investigations on a slightly sort of journalistic level. And I can't find the exact passage, but she at one stage goes off talking about Crowley. And I read this before I read this, and it sort of confirmed the prejudices that Crowley was kind of silly. She says, he clearly didn't really like women. He was just pretending to be straight. He was just gay, and he was using sex magic as an excuse to have sex with men. And ladies and gentlemen, the level of wrongness in that judgment is quite astonishing, because when you read this, which to be fair is written by a Crowley expert, and has got massive, massive amounts of research, massive amounts of footnotes and bibliographies. I mean, one thing comes across very strongly is that he was not gay. He was a raging, what could you say, a raging sort of 85% heterosexual who went through a lot of women, and the women enjoyed it. This is important to point out. He was not misogynistic either, which I think is another myth that has accrued to him. He was bisexual, and he did include men in his sex life, sometimes as a kind of like a menage arrangement with his current girlfriend or wife. So I'm here to sort of confess my sins. I have been one of the people who swallowed the smear campaign against Crowley. I'm sorry. Because I understand, I can really see how this works, you know. Oscar Wilde came out of his disgrace quite well because he became a gay hero. Crowley's much more complicated than that. I think Crowley is similar in a sense to the Marquis de Sade, who is still not rehabilitated because he was sex positive. And again, Marquis de Sade was kind of like conducting thought experiments, and it was so disturbing to so many people in the society that we choose to believe he's mad and he's a monster, and so we'd rather not know. I mean, I don't read his books, but I get it. I get what he was talking about. And it's all part of one thing. It's this Nietzschean, Sardian, Crowleyan response, I think, to the age of Christianity, which was all about turning the other cheek and the meek shall inherit the earth. And so this philosophy is clearly in the line of saying, no, don't be meek, look for your life force. And some people don't want to hear that. Okay, mini rantette over. I don't want to go into talking about Crowley in too much detail here because sadly this book, welcome though it is, I didn't enjoy and I don't recommend because I don't think it's a fantastic job. You know, if the author's listening, I'm sorry, I'm a reviewer. I just have to be honest about this. I came to this thinking that this would be an introduction to Crowley, and it's not. It's a kind of quite advanced Crowley book, and it definitely assumes that you've already read about Crowley. It doesn't give you a kind of a perspective. It doesn't say this thing and this person was more important. You know, watch out. We're now focusing on the more important stuff. We're now focusing on the less important stuff. It's just an avalanche of facts. And for example, the most important thing, as far as I can see in Crowley's life, was when he channeled this thing, the Book of the Law. And that event gets like 12 lines in this book. And then you're on to the next detail. And then you realise that the most important thing has come and gone and you kind of missed it. And similarly, it has a bit of the atmosphere of sort of fan literature in that the author just says, you know, the greatest poet that we've had since William Blake and greatest this and greatest that, but doesn't actually show us him being a great poet or being a great philosopher. That's all kind of like those comments are just flown in, and then you go to the next, and then you go on to the next fact. So I don't really feel much the wiser. I think even though you get it that Crowley has been smeared and he's more sinned against than sinning, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't really answer the questions and it doesn't really put him in perspective, because I come out of this feeling, okay, I get it. There's a level of esotericism which I am not up to scratch with because I don't want to be, because I don't think it's necessary in the new age to get to God through delving into the esoteric. But I don't feel like I'm on very strong ground saying that because I haven't got to grips with the subject. I do find it strange that anyone would want to found a new religion because haven't we had enough religions and hasn't it done enough damage? But that was the early 20th century. That was what people were doing in those days. I did a live stream last night, and one of my viewers, subscribers, was saying that yes, she had felt that there was a kind of like elitist, misogynist thing going on in Crowley. I don't think it was misogyny, but I think you could accuse him of being elitist. I get the impression from this book that he couldn't decide whether he wanted to be king or prime minister, for example, or just an anarchist living in a garret and throwing Molotov cocktails. He seemed to want to do both things at the same time. And maybe that's why things didn't really turn out very well for him. The most interesting detail of the book is that the author claims, again, without really any particularly convincing evidence, that Aleister Crowley is the person who invented the V for Victory campaign that was used by the Allies during the war. And, so there was this V for Victory, which has esoteric meanings as well. And then in Morse code, it was da, 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 da. And then the Allies played the opening of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which is da, 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 da. And then the resistance sprayed V's on the walls in Europe, and then Winston Churchill made a V sign, which was a bit like an F off sign, but it was turned around like that. And this was a Crowleyan thing, because Crowley was about the phallic energy. So, when you're faced with Hitler, the last thing you need to do is turn the other cheek. You need to get it up. You need to, find your energy, find the core of your being, find your sexiness, and then go out and win that war. And so Crowley liked Winston Churchill. He thought that was a great thing. And I think Crowley was sort of like a mad version of Winston Churchill in a way. So again, some of my friends, some of my subscribers online have suggested other Crowley biographies that are more highly recommended, that are easier to read, and so I will be diving into them. But unless you already know about Aleister Crowley, I would say that's not the best one to start with by any means. Incidentally, Tobias Churton is active on YouTube. There's loads of videos, and I have had a look. Looks like good stuff, and they seem to be highly recommended.